The death of Mica Miller has captivated both her community and the public, leaving behind a trail of questions and suspicions. From a reportedly troubled marriage with her estranged husband John Paul to unsettling events leading up to her tragic death, this case has got a lot of people talking. We're going to break down everything we know about Mica Miller, a woman whose death continues to have a lasting impact on those who knew her. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Mica Miller's life and death have become a deeply unsettling story. It's one that raises troubling questions about mental health, alleged domestic violence, the complexities of relationships behind closed doors. The 30-year-old from Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, as we know, was found dead on April 27th. This was just days after filing for divorce from her pastor husband, John Paul Miller. And though authorities have officially ruled the manner of her death to be from a self-inflicted gunshot wound, those who knew Mica well, especially her family, believe there is more to this story. And as we await further updates in the case, particularly surrounding the findings of an FBI raid that occurred back in November at John Paul Miller's home, we're going to take a look back at everything we know so far about Mica Miller's life, her apparently troubled marriage, and the circumstances leading up to her death. So let's start with what we know happened on that fateful day of April 27th when investigators tragically discovered Mica Miller dead in North Carolina's Lumber River State Park. Mica's husband, Pastor John Paul Miller, who was well known in the community for running a ministry formerly known as Solid Rock Church, reportedly left town a day earlier to attend a sports event in Charleston, South Carolina. I will tell you, law enforcement has confirmed to ABC News 4 that he spent the night in Charleston for a sports event, drove back to Myrtle Beach the next day. So his alibi has been confirmed by law enforcement, on top of the fact, again, that the evidence suggests this was a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Having said that, let's go back to this. Meanwhile, according to police, Mica made several troubling decisions that day, and a lot of her whereabouts were captured on security cameras. At around 10:13 a.m., she was seen on her Ring doorbell camera leaving her residence, then returning at 11 a.m. and left again a little over 30 minutes later. Then at around noon, Mica was seen on the surveillance footage of Dick's Pawn Shop, which is in Myrtle Beach, purchasing a weapon. And after that, she heads over to a gas station where she purchases gas and a drink. And in her final moments of life, Mica made this harrowing 911 phone call at around 2:54 p.m.
Robinson County 911, what's the address of your emergency?
Hi, are you able to trace the location of my phone?
Let me see. You don't know where you're at?
At National Park.
Tell me what's happened.
I'm about to kill myself, and I just want my family to know where to find me.
Okay, ma'am. Just listen to what I'm saying, okay? Let me make sure I got the exact location where you're at, okay? Just 1 minute.
She abruptly hangs up that phone call. Attempts to reach her again were unsuccessful, and at around 3:03 p.m., Robeson County deputies, they were dispatched to Lumber River State Park to conduct a welfare check on Mica, and by 3:33 p.m., a search team was gathered, began looking for her, and while they were conducting their search, a fisherman approached them with a bag that he discovered that contained Mica's ID in it, and soon after the search escalated. And the sheriff's office reported that a person heard a cry followed by a gunshot. This was around 4:23 p.m., and a body was found in the water. Now, investigators then located Mica's car, and inside they found a Sig Sauer handgun case in the passenger seat, a box of ammunition in the center console. Receipts were also discovered that corroborated the timeline of Mica's movements that day. A few hours later, the Sig Sauer was located in the water, and authorities were able to match the weapon's serial number to the box that was found in Mica's car. By the way, as you may know, we have been actively following the Mica Miller story for a while here on Sidebar. We've been trying to stay up to date on any new developments. And one of the reasons that we're able to continue to do that kind of work is not only because of you guys, and we can't thank you enough for your support, but also because of our sponsors and the work they do with us. And I have to call out one in particular right now, Upside. Upside's awesome. Upside is a free app, so easy to use, that helps you get cash back when you buy food, gas, and groceries. Real money, real cash back, money that appears in your Upside app that you can transfer straight into your bank account. Here, you can see I used Upside to find a gas station. I claimed an offer, pay with my credit card at the pump, followed the steps on the app. Guess what? I got cash back. And you can use Upside at all different kinds of places, restaurants, convenience stores. So to find out how much you could earn, click the link in the description to download Upside or scan the QR code on screen and use our promo code SIDEBAR and you'll get an extra 25 cents back on every gallon on your first tank of gas. Hope you can check it out. Now, at the time of her death, it wasn't immediately known what her cause of death was. The medical examiner's office would release their findings 4 days later. But nonetheless, just one day after the shocking news of her passing, Pastor John Paul Miller made this announcement to the congregation of Solid Rock Church.
I got a call late last night. My wife has passed away. And it was self-induced, and it was up in North Carolina. Y'all knew that she wasn't well mentally, and that she needed her medicine that was hard to get to her.
That was what was weird. That was a truly shocking announcement that he made at the end of a service where, according to spectators, he appeared calm, even at times jovial. And we also heard that he mentioned Mica's alleged mental state to the congregation, which, is a little surprising considering you'd think that information would be kept private. Another way of looking at it is it's hard to judge what people do in certain circumstances. But I do want you to remember that point because we're going to dive a little bit deeper into that a bit later. But despite the announcement, Mica's family and friends, they were not convinced that this is all open and shut. On May 2nd, a person who said that they were a close friend of hers posted to the platform X, writing, she 100% would not have committed suicide. She was excited to start a new life, no longer living in fear of him, and was finally on her way out. So who is the him that this person is referring to? Well, it seems that this is none other than Mica's husband, John Paul Miller. Now, John Paul was forthcoming in his sermon about Mica's supposed mental health issues, but he didn't seem to mention that the two were in the midst of divorcing. And that's important because according to Mica's family, they believe that because she took this important step to leave him, her mentality was to move on and start a new life, which would make her taking her own life very strange. We actually spoke with Mica's family in a previous episode of SIDEBAR where they, in contrast, voiced their skepticism over Miller's assertion of her mental health issues. They even suggested that she was doing fine before she met him.
So before Mica married John Paul, she had no signs, no history, no indications of mental illness at all.
She wanted to trust that Mr. Miller Jr. was actually doing the right thing for them until she got away from him and had more time, when she spent more time with us, to peel off some of those layers and realize what was going on. And then she started becoming herself again and got a job and everything else and was doing fine and was happy-go-lucky self again, excited about the future, and which is something he did not like. Just very terrible.
And so Mica's family firmly stood by what they said were her intentions to start anew after finalizing or attempting to finalize her divorce with John Paul, and that her mindset was geared towards a new beginning, not an end. But Miller was firm in his beliefs about her death, and by the way, he has never been criminally charged or officially investigated in connection with her death. As I mentioned, there's an alibi there. And on May 2nd, in an interview with local affiliate WPDE, Miller mentioned the struggles that he says Mica had been having with her mental health, saying she had struggled with suicide before, and each time we helped her through it and took her to her doctor, and we got through it, and everything was fine. And so this past time, it's still a shock, an incredible shock. Well, during a memorial service he organized for her at Solid Rock Church, he delivered this interesting eulogy.
She'd get tourists to take our picture, and I say, okay, thank you. She said, oh, no, this isn't good. Give it back to them, and they do it again, But she told me that she was so creative. Everything she did was so creative. What's the next picture? What's the next picture? She'd stop. We'd be on the way to like a show or something. She'd say, stop, I gotta get a picture. I said, we're gonna be late. She said, I don't care. What's the next picture? Next picture.
And on that same day, Mica's family held their own service for her along the beach in North Myrtle Beach. And days later, the Robeson County medical examiner put an end to the speculation surrounding Mica's death when it was officially released that she had died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. However, the Robeson County Sheriff's Office also confirmed that Mica had filed several police reports in the months leading up to her death, which all had to do with various allegations against John Paul Miller. So this leads us to a huge lingering question in this case. Even though Mica's death was confirmed to be self-inflicted, what role did her apparent tumultuous marriage to her estranged husband play in her decision to end it all? Now, obviously, we will never know the true answer to that, but let's look at the beginning, take a look at everything that we can to confirm what we do know or seem to know about their marriage and what questions still remain today. So according to Mica's family, she had met John Paul Miller when she was 14 years old as a member of his church youth group, and there have been accusations that he was grooming her. She was also reportedly married to John Paul's best friend Jeremy before she got together with John Paul, and John Paul was also previously married before he met Mica to a woman named Allison Williams. They were together for 6 years until they split in 2015. And then John Paul married Mica in 2017. They lived together in Horry County until things took a very rocky turn. Now, in a complaint that was filed by Allison Williams regarding custody arrangements for the children she shared with John Paul, she detailed what she had witnessed between him and Mica. And from her perspective, it all seemed to begin spiraling in late 2021 or early 2022. She alleged JP would preach sermons on the Sundays our children were with him and present in the congregation, disparaging Mica and indicating that she had mental health issues and eventually putting her in a mental health hospital. And she even describes these physical signs of violence that she saw when she went to pick up the couple's daughter. I observed holes in their walls, hinges off the doors, pieces of paper taped to the wall with negative affirmations about Mica. Now, we told you earlier about what John Paul claimed regarding Mica's mental health issues, but according to his first wife, he was also struggling as well. She alleges JP's mental health seemed to be really spiraling out of control, and he began acting even more bizarre with the constant discord between JP and Mica and JP's own self-reported mental health struggles. The thought of JP having access to guns in his home terrified me for the safety of our children. According to Allison, John Paul was telling her of his mental health issues, but to the general public, he was not revealing anything like this. Eventually, though, as things continued to deteriorate, Mica decided she had enough, and she started to take steps to supposedly escape John Paul. Allison even alleges Mica reached out to her. Mica began calling me for advice on how to free herself from JP and for guidance as to counselors and people to assist her. And then, in October of 2023, Mica apparently took an official and huge step in the process towards her freedom by filing for divorce from John Paul. According to those filings, Mica accused John Paul of cheating on her, along with threatening to throw her belongings into the yard, locking her out of their house, defaming, demeaning her in front of the church congregation. And tensions just continued to boil over for them. However, when in February, Mica told police she was involuntarily hospitalized by John Paul. According to a statement that she gave to police, Mica said she was involuntarily committed for 2 days, beginning on February 8th, and she had to leave her car in a Walmart parking lot. And she says when she was released 2 days later on the 10th, she said she returned to the Walmart to find her car gone, and she believed that John Paul had fraudulently had her hospitalized and had stolen her car while she was away. Now, when police contacted John Paul about this incident, he apparently told them that Mica had suffered from mental health disorders, saying she spends large amounts of money, she stops taking her prescribed medication, and that he took the car away from her so she wouldn't sell it. And our understanding is because the two were still legally married, the car was considered marital property, and therefore it was deemed not stolen according to law enforcement, so there was nothing more they could do. Well, 2 days after that report, on February 12th, Mica's divorce filing was withdrawn, although the reasons for that remain unclear. But what is clear is that their struggles showed no signs of letting up, because as we recently obtained a 911 phone call that Mica placed on February 15th, where she apparently told dispatchers that John Paul had throat punched her in a violent episode.
911, what's the address of the emergency?
Hi, I have somebody who I believe to be in a manic state and is a direct danger to the people in his household and himself and others. I need an immediate pickup, not the 72-hour pickup that a spouse can initiate. I need this to be a little quicker because he is a flight risk. There's been domestic violence. He put his hands on me, and he's pushed me down in front of thousands of people at Disney World. And so, yeah, and his best friend even saw that happen. He slapped drinks right out of my hand. I was in the hospital after that from just a panic attack of what was happening.
In that call, Mica also mentions her fears that John Paul had stolen her belongings, that he was going to try and impersonate her.
He's got my CWP license, he's got my public notary license, and my seal and my stamp, which he's been trying to force me to sign a post-nup for the last year and a half, and I fear that he's going to use my seal to impersonate my signature like he's been impersonating my identity for the past 3 days. To sign that post-nup saying that I get nothing if we divorce. And that's not even my biggest concern. It's the identity theft. I don't care about not getting anything from the divorce. I really don't care. But that was given to me by the Secretary of State, trusting me to keep it safe. And then when I got in the hospital, they gave all my belongings to my husband, and we're here now.
By the way, we did a full deep dive on the 911 call in another episode of Sidebar, so definitely go check that out on our Law and Crime YouTube page. But after this, we're up to March 11th, when, according to local reporting, Mica made 2 complaints to police. She first contacted them at around 1 in the morning, reporting that her tire on her Honda had been slashed. And Mica also told police that the suspect, whose name was redacted, may have placed a razor blade on her tire to cause it to rip. She had this car dropped off at a dealership for repairs, and she then made a second complaint later that morning at a gas station, where she said the suspect pulled up beside her vehicle at a gas pump. According to the police report, the man attempted to engage Mica in conversation, but she immediately told him to leave her alone, that she didn't want to talk. In response, Mica reportedly pulled out her phone to begin recording the interaction, and upon seeing this, the suspect allegedly sped off, only to follow her shortly afterward to the East Coast Honda dealership where she was picking up her car. And Mica continued to report her whereabouts and actions to the responding officer, who was standing with her at the dealership when another unexpected incident occurred. So while at the dealership with the officer, Mica apparently receives a no-caller ID call, which, according to the report, turned out to be the suspect attempting to contact her. Now, the officer, witnessing the call, advised the suspect that Mica didn't want any further communication and that this alleged harassment, if it should continue, legal action, including the filing of warrants, could be pursued. So the suspect reportedly acknowledged the officer's warning, and despite the officer's intervention, Mica was still concerned for her safety. So she confided in the officer, saying that she had blocked the suspect's number, but was still receiving calls and text messages from him using other phone numbers. And the situation escalated further when Mica apparently reached out to the officer later on that day with a very troubling discovery. The mechanics who had worked on her vehicle at East Coast Honda had found a tracking device attached to her car. So fearing for her safety, Mica immediately contacted law enforcement again, stating that she was at the magistrate's office attempting to obtain a restraining order against the suspect. And the officer arranged to meet her in person to retrieve the GPS tracking device as part of an ongoing investigation. Now, again, all of this is according to reports filed by Mica Miller, and while the suspect's name is redacted in the reports, it is believed to be John Paul who we're talking about, because Mica did go to the magistrate's office that day to file a restraining order against him. A bench trial was held on March 26 regarding that request. The case was dismissed without prejudice. No restraining order ended up being issued. And then we go later on in March, when Mica takes to social media to share what appears to be this vulnerable account of what appears to be her experience with abuse. And she offered support to others who may have been going through similar situations.
God hates divorce, but why? According to everybody I've asked and the scriptures that I've found, it's because it hurts people. But does abuse hurt people? How do you think God feels about that? So, I want to remind you, like a bunch of people have been reminding me lately, that I'm God's bride first.
And her words there appeared to be a clear indication that the difficulties within the marriage had reached a point of no return. And this entered into a much darker realm. Because in one of her final posts on Facebook, Mica uploaded a selfie with the caption, "When terrible, terrible, terrible things happen to you, you all know what I'm talking about, RPF, resting peace face." And she included the hashtags, "Still blessed," and "God is good." And now we are up to April. And in the final days of Mica's life, during that month, she had filed for legal separation from John Paul, citing irreconcilable differences and abuse. And we talked to Mica's attorney, Regina Ward, on a previous episode of Sidebar about that filing.
She had found her passion and she was ready to do that. And she was empowered and felt uplifted, in that we could pursue this without, it being just an all-out litigated fight. So we moved forward on what's called the grounds of 1 year separation. So it's not ripe for a divorce yet, but at the moment it's called separate maintenance and support. A lot of people refer to that as a legal separation. They are legally separated whether there's a court document or not. So the point was that we were going to go forward on this June 5th hearing, wherein she was going to ask the court for specific relief, return and possession of certain property of hers that she wanted to have. And then we would just wait for the 1 year to pass. And at the end of 1 year separation, then she would file for an actual divorce at that time.
And sadly, we know that Mica would never make it to that June 5th hearing. She officially served those separation papers to John Paul on April 25th. And 2 days later is when tragedy struck. Now, in the aftermath of Mica's death, scrutiny has remained on John Paul Miller. For weeks, demonstrators had gathered outside of Miller's ministry, Solid Rock Church, to call for what they say is justice for Mica. And as that was going on November 1st, the FBI had searched Miller's home, where they were seen removing items, although we still don't have any further information on what they were looking for or why, or what this investigation is about. But shortly after the raid, tensions with these demonstrators boiled over, and John Paul Miller was arrested after he apparently got into an altercation with a woman outside the church. That incident happened on November 6th, and video of that confrontation was posted on social media.
There's JP.
Hi!
There's JP.
Justice for Mica!
That's JP. Look at him running. Look at him running. Look at him running. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Uh-oh, y'all. What's going on?
So authorities, they were called to the scene, but John Paul wasn't arrested on site. He was arrested later on. And according to an incident report, the woman that he was involved in the altercation with, Sandra Karen, told police what she says happened. She states that while she was on the sidewalk in front of Solid Rock Church, she observed the offender recording them from behind protesters' vehicles in the parking lot. She then went across the street to confront him. She stated she called out to the offender to ask what he was doing. The offender walked away, but she called back out to him, and the offender came back and met her in between two vehicles where words were exchanged, and the victim said the offender began recording her. While the offender was holding his phone up to her face, the victim said the offender asked her, "What you gonna do?" and tapped the bill of her hat 2 times and walked away, after which the victim yelled at the offender, "Don't you touch me," multiple times. So John Paul was later arrested, and he was charged with 3rd-degree assault and battery. He was released on bond the following day. And John Paul then apparently shut down Solid Rock Church in an effort to maybe launch a new ministry, Living Water Church. And this is where we stand today. So while we've talked a lot about John Paul Miller, it is important to mention again that he has not been charged, nor is he being investigated in connection with the death of Mica Miller. But having said that, this is just kind of a summary of where we are, who Mica was, and what we know so far. We will continue to update you on this case, especially in the new year. That's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.